Hey, you're listening to Rising into Mindful Motherhood. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Wood. I'm a barefoot mama bear, pharmacist, integrative fertility health coach, and lover of all things nature and animals. I'm on a mission to have intentional conversations about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, and beyond. My mindful guest and I will be talking about struggles, wins, natural wellness, and how we grow and transform as we enter motherhood. My background in healthcare has shown me how broken our medical system is. My own struggles to become pregnant has shown the lack of support for mamas to be, the lack of guidance for women to have a nourishing and vibrant pregnancy, the isolation, mom guilt, and all the things we hold after bringing baby earthside. I want this platform to be a place where women can feel connected, safe, and supported to share and hear their stories. A place to use our voice to discuss and advocate about what we need and deserve as mothers. So let's dive in, shall we? Hello and welcome to Rising into Mindful Motherhood. I'm super excited for our conversation today. I'll be chatting with Dr. Angela Cates. She's a pharmacist, board-certified pharmacotherapy specialist, and certified functional medicine practitioner. She is the founder of Cultivate Health and Wellness, a functional medicine practice with a focus on the gut-brain connection. She'll be sharing today about maternal gut health and the effect that it can have on neurodevelopment. Welcome, Angela. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yes. So why don't you just start by telling us, how did you end up on this path of healing in children and just being able to support parents?
Yeah. So I'm a pharmacist like you by training, and I worked, 3 years in a hospital and then 12 years at the VA in an ambulatory care clinic. So was able to really work one-on-one with patients, which I loved. Helping. We did talk about some diet and lifestyle things in addition to the med management. But what really kind of led me into this path of functional medicine is when my own son started to really struggle with anxiety. And the model that I knew was the medication model, the counseling, and we went down that road, but we weren't able to get him the help, get the improvement that we were hoping to see, which, really caused me to feel pretty helpless as a parent, because I'm like, here I am, a parent, and I know all these things about these medications, and we're still struggling. And even this whole time I kept saying, but why is he having all this anxiety? Why is he having ADHD that's difficult to control? And so I really wanted to dig into why, which is really what functional medicine is all about: finding the root cause, finding the why. So it led me to seeking a functional medicine practitioner for him. And then that led me to doing some CE, some continuing education on functional medicine. And just it kind of evolved. I did some testing on myself and was really able to improve my health by addressing my gut health. And then I just really felt called just to share this with other people, what I had been learning. So that's kind of how I ended up here in this more of a non-traditional role as a pharmacist. But I think it's a good place. I can really meet people where they're at and combine my knowledge of the medications with also this functional medicine, root causes. What else can we look at before we go to the medications?
Mm-hmm. I love that. And how just amazing that you really kind of took things into your own hands, pharmacist aside, but as a parent, just recognizing like these medications are not really helping. So obviously there's got to be something, what's going on underneath? Like, what is the root cause of what is going on with my son here? So that's amazing, because I can only imagine how helpless that does feel. And, my nephew has been diagnosed with ADHD, and working in the retail space and seeing those prescriptions come in, it's it feels like, I don't know, and maybe you could speak more to this, like that diagnosis is just becoming a lot more common. And I don't know if it's being like overused, kind of like how antibiotics can be overused as well, or if it's really just happening more. So what would you say are some common causes of, ADHD, anxiety, and depression in children?
Mhm. Well, we have genetics, which can be a factor. I mean, that still plays a role. Of course, we know we can do things to affect the way that our genes are expressed. Certain environmental triggers, certain foods can affect the way our genes are expressed, but genetics does play a role. Environmental toxins. So we are exposed to so many more toxins in our world today than we used to. The food dyes, the additives, the things in our cleaners, it's just everywhere around us. So our body has a higher toxic burden to deal with. Nutrient deficiencies are another fairly common cause of ADHD. Zinc, copper, magnesium, B vitamins, when those are low, those can contribute to those symptoms of ADHD and anxiety. And then food sensitivities, those certain food sensitivities can really stimulate the nervous system and cause those hyperactive symptoms, or even causing some of that brain fog that makes it difficult to focus. So those are some of the things that I look at. And gut health, that's one of my big focuses, but disruptions in the gut microbiome can really affect the ADHD and anxiety and depression as well.
Yeah, definitely. And when you think about it, when our gut is in dysbiosis, then we can already have trouble absorbing nutrients from our food, on top of the fact that a lot of our foods today are very nutrient depleted already. And that's if your child will even eat a fruit or vegetable. I mean, I know that there's a lot of children who struggle with that and kind of stick to a very bland, kind of processed only food diet, which can definitely make it difficult. So, yeah, in terms of gut health, I would love to just hop right into that topic, because it's really fascinating how important our gut health truly is to so many things in our body, but, mentally as well.
Right. Yeah. So there's something called the gut brain connection, but it's really not just one connection. I mean, there's multiple factors in there. We have the vagus nerve, which is connecting your brain and your gut, and communication goes both ways between your vagus nerve. You also have the immune system, which the majority of it is housed in your gut, and it really helps to regulate what's going on. And your immune system communicates with your brain as well. And like you mentioned, if there is dysbiosis, or if there's something we call leaky gut, it's letting things through. Normally, if you have a healthy gut barrier, you're just going to absorb nutrients from your food, but toxins, bacteria, food particles, they're going to pass on through. But if that gut barrier is leaky, foods are leaking through, like undigested food particles, different bacteria and toxins, and the immune system recognizes those as foreign. So then it's going to create this immune response. It's going to bring up a bunch of inflammation. Those things can cross into the brain and causing inflammation in the brain. So that's one way they're connected. Also in your gut, you make serotonin and some of your neurotransmitters that are your happy, feel good neurotransmitters. Your good gut bacteria also make a lot of your B vitamins, which are important for your body to then make those neurotransmitters like serotonin. And then you also have the, I want to call it the HPA axis with your stress. So increased stress causes more overgrowth of bad bacteria. And also on the flip side, that overgrowth of bad bacteria can increase the stress response. So you have a connection there as well. So there's really several factors that affect that. And so that's, part of what I help parents work through is looking at gut health, looking at nutrient deficiencies. And And yeah, using the microbiome, which we were talking about a little bit before we started, but even starting before birth, the microbiome and how that can affect things.
Yes. I know just from how I help my clients, I do definitely recommend that we start focusing on building up their gut health and just making sure that things are moving smoothly. And, sometimes even myself, like you don't even think about like ADHD or anxiety or depression down the line. I know a lot of things that I've kind of counseled my clients on is, like asthma, eczema, diabetes, kind of cleaning up their diet and supporting a healthy gut microbiome. So this is really amazing, to me, and it's fascinating that it's just another thing to add to the list of like the importance of our gut health, even before you get pregnant and while you're pregnant. And I know that studies have shown that that can actually, like our gut microbiome can actually kind of infiltrate the placenta, and that's where like the baby's immune system is basically started from the ground up. And then you have, was the child born from vaginal birth or C-section? And then you can go as far as were they breastfed or formula fed? So I would love for you to just share any knowledge at all that you have from that, pretty much starting from like the fertility space. So preparing yourself for pregnancy.
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to, making sure your micronutrients are addressed, that you're addressing any levels that are low, any deficiencies, omega-3s, which I think we've known most of the multivitamins or prenatals are going to have that DHA and EPA. But those omegas really affect your brain development. So making sure your levels are optimal. And there's some tests they can do to test for that, but supporting that either with foods that contain your omega-3s or supplements. And then making sure you have a good diversity in your gut microbiome. So there's different tests that you can do. Just also taking a good probiotic, a spore-based probiotic, especially if you have maybe had a lot of antibiotic use, or you have a lot of stress, maybe you're having some digestive issues, then you might really want to do the test, like a stool test to see what's going on. But a good spore-based probiotic. Prebiotics are really important. Those are kind of what feed the good gut bacteria. So prebiotic foods, those are your fruits and your vegetables. Or you can take a prebiotic supplement if you're having trouble tolerating those in your diet. And those help increase what they call short chain fatty acids. And that's what really can cross into the placenta and helps with that blood-brain barrier development for the infant. And then any like infections. So if say you were having a lot of heartburn, even before you get pregnant, like digging in to see what's going on, maybe there is an H. pylori infection or some sort of infection in your gut, you would want to address that before you get pregnant. And then really, I think you hit on this a lot, but the stress, addressing your stress, because in addition to like a poor gut microbiome, stress during pregnancy has been linked to increased anxiety, ADHD, autism in your child. And not that we want to make anyone have more things to worry about or feel more guilty, but just bringing awareness to what's going on in your body can have an effect on your child. And then, like you said, vaginal birth, if possible, is definitely preferred because then you're sharing that microbiome, the beneficial bacteria from even the vaginal biome, and that has lower rates. I remember, my children are older, so mine are 13 and 11, and I remember even them talking about like vaginal birth is better for asthma and allergies, but it's like now we know it's also better for the mental health of your child as well. So if it's not possible to do the vaginal birth, just making sure you're getting the skin to skin contact that can help share some of those microbiome, those beneficial bacteria. Like you said, breastfeeding, if possible. Again, that's going to help share some of that good microbiome. If you're not able to breastfeed, doing an organic formula, some of them do have prebiotic fibers in them. So that's important. Because what I didn't mention this yet, but the first 1,000 days of development are really like key for the child. That's when the brain is really developing. That's also the gut microbiome really develops those first 2 years. And so that's when it's really important to support it. Other things that can help your infant develop their good microbiome: avoiding harsh detergents and cleaners. I think especially coming out of a pandemic, we were used to sanitizing everything. But really, they need some of that exposure to help have a healthy immune system and to help get some of those healthy bacteria. While you're breastfeeding, you can continue taking the prebiotics and the probiotics to help with your child, to help with their gut microbiome. And if you did have a vaginal birth or you weren't able to have a vaginal birth or you're not able to breastfeed, there's infant probiotics you can use to kind of help get their microbiome going. Because that really, like I said, establishes their immune system, helps establish that healthy gut-brain connection. What do I want to say? So yeah, the foods, especially with oligosaccharides, so like your onions, artichokes, broccoli, your fruits, and kind of your legumes, those things can really help diversify your gut microbiome.
So many good nuggets there. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And, a couple of things that came to mind while you were talking is when you're taking care of your microbiome, especially when you're pregnant. So there's a thing called group B strep. So they will check for that. I can't remember exactly when. I want to say like 36 weeks or something like that. They'll check to see if you're, vaginally, to see if this group B strep is popping up. And if it does, then they're going to want to put you on antibiotics when you're, delivering, depending on how the delivery is going. So that's kind of another reason why it's really, really important to make sure you are taking a really good probiotic. Ideally having prebiotic foods, food.
Mm-hmm.
I like food over supplements if possible. And then, I know, and maybe you could speak more to this. Oh gosh, I can't remember the first part, but it's like Bifidobacterium rhamnosus, or is it Lactobacillus rhamnosus and Lactobacillus reuteri? If I'm saying those are right. Those are specific probiotic strains that can work really well for kind of hopefully preventing that group B strep. Mm-hmm. So I remember when I was pregnant, that was something that I really focused on. And, having a grass-fed, full-fat, plain Greek yogurt that just had so many strains of like probiotics in there was, and luckily for me, I had tested negative. So there are things you can do to hopefully prevent that group B strep. And then if you aren't able to deliver vaginally, you'd have to talk to the hospital, but they can actually swab the vaginal canal.
Vaginal seeding.
Yes. And I can't remember, do they put it in their nose or their
I think their nose and their mouth.
Yeah.
I was reading up a little bit about that, and it sounds like some, depending on your doctor, you might have a little bit of convincing to do to get them. But yes, that I think they're definitely coming out with more studies, and that is something that can be done. Yeah, if you're not able to deliver vaginally. Yeah. But like you said, making sure that you don't have the group B strep. Before they do that. So
yeah. So luckily there's options, because there are things that we cannot control, and sometimes, birth does things kind of do their own thing when you're having a child. So luckily you do have your options, and it's just kind of being informed of those and talking to your doctor ahead of time. So
Mhm.
when the day is here, if you were to have a C-section, it's not chaotic and you guys are all on the same page and everything like that. So
Yes.
amazing.
Yeah. And like you said, supporting that with those specific strains. And there was a couple of strains too, like if stress is really an issue, the bifidobacteria longum, that one can really help with the stress response. And they've done some studies on that, taking that prenatally or while you're pregnant to kind of help as well. And then, yeah, if you do end up having to have an antibiotic, there's some probiotics you can use to kind of help decrease the impact from that. Like you
Mhm.
said, we have our best intentions, but sometimes those things are needed. So I know I had to have a C-section, even though I didn't want to and tried to avoid it. So, we do the best we can.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that's all we can do, and that's why it's knowledge is power, so you can feel informed and then be able to advocate for what you want for yourself and also your child, because at the end of the day, that's what we have to do as moms and parents. So amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So what would you say, if if a child maybe kind of wasn't able to be exposed to all of these really good microbiome supporting mechanisms while they were in utero or born, or even in those first 1000 days, which I it's so important. Um, when would you say that these symptoms kind of start to surface? Is there like a typical time, or is it kind of all over the place? And I know, like you mentioned before, we all have our genetics, but certain environmental factors can kind of turn that gene expression on, or it can turn it off. So maybe there isn't kind of a pattern there.
Yeah. I think it's kind of varied. I mean, the microbiome is linked to autism as well. And of course, those symptoms show up earlier, a lot of times before or around age 2. So the symptoms can start showing up pretty early, especially some of the developmental and behavioral symptoms. But some of these symptoms can show up later in life, and maybe it could be due to the child having a lot of antibiotic exposure or other triggers later in life that can trigger some of the symptoms as well. So I think it depends, because as much as we like to boil things down to like, oh, your gut microbiome was out of balance, that's why you have this, it's usually a multitude of factors. Like you had this stressor, you also are low in this nutrient, your gut microbiome is out of balance. It's, at least with the clients I see, there's usually multiple factors that have kind of come together to create that scenario.
Mhm.
So I don't know if there's necessarily a specific pattern. Sometimes you won't notice, especially some of the ADHD symptoms, until maybe they're in school and that certain environment is making it more difficult. Because if, say, they were able to be outside a lot and get a lot of physical activity, that really can help manage their symptoms. But maybe once they have to be in a really structured environment, then you start seeing those symptoms come out. So did it just show up now, or was it, related to environment? So yeah,
Mhm.
I don't know that I can say for sure, but usually
Yeah.
there's multiple things going on.
Sure. Um, what would be kind of some early symptoms that parents could be on the lookout for?
Some things to kind of watch for. Um, well, and that's the thing with ADHD, even we have kind of our typical symptoms we think of, but it can really vary from child to child. But some things that I see, compared to other children their age, they may have a harder time sitting still, a harder time like focusing on one activity. Um, they can have some rigid thinking. So it could be difficult going from like one activity to another, or having schedule changes can be difficult for them.
Mhm.
difficulty with emotional regulation. So kind of handling some of their emotions. There could be like, bigger swings in their emotions. So those are some things you would probably see more at a younger age. Typically, as they get older, and especially girls often present differently than boys, but there may be more of the inattention, kind of daydreaming, not focusing as well. There's a lot of anxiety that can go along with the ADHD, and that you can see a lot of like perfectionism and being very self-critical. Those are some things that show up as well. Just trying to strive to reach that point, but having difficulty doing that. So,
yeah, I can see how some of those things can show up but can also vary from person to person. I know that, I think my nephew maybe has trouble sitting still in class, but I also think, like you mentioned, if our kids were able to kind of have more time outside and kind of, well, just being exposed to the sun, fresh air, moving around, instead of being in such a structured environment where you have to sit for hours at a time. I mean, I do feel that is unfortunately kind of another cause of why we are seeing such almost like a epidemic of these, mental mood kind of things that are going on in our kids these days. So what's really nice is I feel like there is a bit of a movement of like forest schools out there, and which kind of allows for a lot more free movement, Montessori schools, Waldorf schools. So kind of really letting the child lead, their interest in education a little bit more. So I wish that, like typical conventional schools would be able to introduce that and support that a little bit more, because I do think that it could be helpful for so many kiddos.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, they're spending so much less time outside than they used to, and getting much less physical activity. And I know that's definitely contributing to some of those symptoms. And so, yeah, the more, in an ideal world, they would get multiple recesses, lots of breaks, lots of movement breaks, because for a lot of kids, that can really make a big difference.
Yeah. And, in this day and age now, they do a lot of work on iPads at school, which I never had that growing up. And now kids are going home and they're on an iPad, a phone, TV. I mean, so many things. So do you have any kind of advice or tips in terms of a screen time, we'll just call it?
Yeah. I mean, that's a challenging one now that the schools have moved to that, because, you want to limit screen time. I think the times vary depending on age, but they say like less than 2 hours a day, but often they're on it more than 2 hours a day at school. So the biggest thing I recommend with screens is especially cutting it off an hour before bedtime. If they have had screen time all day at school, trying to have them do something outside or not on the screen when they first get home. But yeah, trying to limit that in the evening. And it's a difficult balance, because even though they've been on a screen all day at school, they haven't really maybe got to do what they wanted on their screen. It was schoolwork. So, you want to balance some freedom with that. But I think, just trying to put some guidelines on it of like, hey, let's go do something else for a little bit, and then let's stop it, before bed. Is that we've got, we could have a whole nother discussion on this, but how that affects like your melatonin and your sleep cycle. And I really didn't mention this, but sleep is a big issue with ADHD, anxiety, and depression. And studies are really showing that even especially teenagers and kids who have activities, they are not getting enough sleep. And so that contributes to a lot of these issues. So sleep is something we definitely address as well. And that kind of goes back to the devices and spending time outside, and all that kind of ties in full circle.
Yeah, it's for me, it's like a heartbreaking vicious cycle when you think about it, because we are exposed to so many environmental factors. Our food is not the same as it used to be. And we are such in a tech savvy time right now that blue light, and just being like, I feel it as an entrepreneur. I do a lot of my work on my computer, on my phone, and I can feel my brain going numb and fuzzy after doing that. So our poor kiddos are just being, all these things are being thrown at them. And it's just really concerning for like generations ahead, and how these kids will be, as they grow up into adults, like what is that going to look like? So I know you mentioned so many things already, but what would be kind of like the simplest? I know everyone has their own, situation, but the simplest recommendations that you would have that could really support everyone at the end of the day in terms of maybe diet, supplementation, if there's any, we'll just say general supplements that could be helpful if someone's kids are kind of going down this road and a parent wants to really nip it in the bud or prevent it, really.
General is hard because everybody's different, but I mean, good nutrition is so important. So doing your whole food diet, avoiding the added sugars, the preservatives, dyes, artificial sweeteners, just really focusing on whole nutritious food. I mean, I think that's number one. Getting some time outside, getting enough sleep. I don't know that we're to the point of recommending probiotics for everyone, but I certainly think that they can be helpful in a lot of situations, especially, if your child has been on a lot of antibiotics, or, we're seeing lots of kiddos these days with lots of tummy aches and kind of constipated, and some of those issues. I think a probiotic would definitely be helpful for that. And if it is challenging to get your child to eat their fruits and vegetables, or especially a whole variety of those, doing a good vitamin micronutrient broad spectrum that's going to have all the zinc and magnesium and vitamin D is definitely a good place to start.
Yeah, I love that. And I think really the easiest and most simplest form of medicine truly is food. So just kind of looking at that and, trying to buy organic when you can. Obviously, it's, not easy, especially with the inflation that we're all going through right now. But, I like to say to focus on their Dirty Dozen by the Environmental Working Group is a really good place to start. Because I imagine, those pesticides, do they play a role in terms of,
Yes,
these
absolutely.
things?
They can affect, they disrupt the gut microbiome, especially like the glyphosates do. And they can stimulate the nervous system, which can increase those ADHD symptoms. So for sure, yes, I recommend, like you said, organic when possible, especially that Dirty Dozen, doing, we can't get too caught up in trying to avoid everything because you would make yourself go crazy. But, I like to tell people we kind of have a bucket. And so the more things you can kind of take out of your bucket as far as, environmental exposures, the better. So, when you're preparing foods at home, when you can buy organic, all of that helps. When you're using like non-toxic cleaning products, skincare products, all of that helps.
Absolutely. And I like to say to my clients, which I feel like, it's all encompassing too, focusing on the things that you use the most or that you eat the most. So for example, my daughter loves apples. Like she could eat apples every single day, but I believe they're on the Dirty Dozen, if my memory is serving me right. So that would be, a produce that I would definitely want to get organically because she's consuming so much of it. And then I think that goes for like our beauty or body or home products as well. So something that you're using a lot of. So your laundry detergent, or
Yes.
something that you're putting on your body because your body is your biggest organ at the end of the day. So, because it can be overwhelming. Like you said, we would drive ourselves crazy if we tried to,
Yes.
avoid everything that you can. So there's definitely like the 80-20 rule, for sure. So, amazing. And I know that you had mentioned you have a freebie, and that is to book a free consultation with you.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Amazing. And I will drop that link in the show notes for sure.
Okay.
And I would love for you to tell the audience where they can learn more and connect with you, because this is something that is becoming more common. And I'm sure people who are listening, would want to connect with you in case maybe they've seen some of these symptoms kind of arise in their kiddos.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Instagram at Dr. Angela Cates, also on Facebook, Cultivate Health and Wellness. And then very soon, my website should be ready, focusing on ADHD, called beyondadhdrx.com.
Awesome.
So that's where you can find me.
That's super exciting. Great. Do you have any final words for the listeners here? Because I know that this topic can be really overwhelming and kind of frustrating for parents who are trying to do all the things to kind of really support their children.
Yeah. I would say, especially if your child, if they are struggling with ADHD or anxiety or depression, make sure you get yourself, I have started a Facebook group, or get a group in your community, but get support, because you can feel very alone and isolated, especially if other people don't understand. And in most cases, you're going to have to do a lot of advocating for your child, with the school, with the doctor, with other parents. And so just getting yourself a supportive group that knows what you've been through, that can understand and can support you in that.
That's amazing advice, and I couldn't agree more. Definitely, I think just seeing, what my sister and my nephew has had to go through, and I remember the doctor really kind of pushing her to go the medication way and almost kind of guilting her when she would want to take breaks or, holidays from it, like weekends off and things like that. So really having that support and community, and, I'll always go back to just having that knowledge for yourself so you can feel confident advocating for your child's health, because you can have the teachers, kind of getting involved as well, and maybe what the teacher or the doctor doesn't feel aligned for you. So definitely having that community, I think, is super key. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I think that this topic is fascinating, and I hope that, parents do know that they have more options than just the medication. So I love what you're doing, and I think that you're going to make a really big impact. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's great to share, and I love what you're doing as well. And yeah, very, very cool.
Thank you so much. So thank you for tuning in today. Make sure you follow and leave a rating so we can connect with more mamas, and I will see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast. If this episode resonated with you or gave you an aha moment, stop what you're doing right now and write a review. This simple act of kindness helps me get this podcast out to connect with as many women as I possibly can. I also have a special offer. If you send me a screenshot of your review, I will take $250 off one of my premium coaching containers. Let me know what resonated with you the most and why. So connect with me in my free Facebook community or tag me on Instagram. You'll find both listed below. Thanks again from the bottom of my heart for tuning in to this episode, and I'll see you next time.